On this edition of the program, is the popular vote actually going to go Republican? Gallup polling seems to think so. Does Michael Cohen agree? We find out. Plus, on-the-ground reporting from Dearborn, Michigan and Springfield, Ohio, thanks to Claire Meynial of Le Poix. Also, Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney on stage together. What a world. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, and Daily Tech News Show.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for October 4th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young here, joining you on the program. We got a long episode for you. Big, meaty, juicy episode. We're talking little numbers up top with Michael Cohen. We get a little bit into some Middle East policy. Then in the middle, we're got some breaking news on the dock worker strike ending for now, but out of the election picture. We have a union not endorsing Kamala Harris and the forming of the New Democrats. It's progressives plus George W. Bush. That's what it was on stage. In fact, really, not really even progressives. It was just kind of George W. Bush Republicans up on stage, or at least that's how it sounded with Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney. We'll talk about that. And then Claire Meynial of Le Poix newspaper, French newspaper. She is a roving reporter, and on the heels of that Liz Cheney, Kamala Harris moment, there are some people in Dearborn, Michigan who do not look at that the same way that I think the Harris campaign thinks they're going to, or maybe they think that they're just going to shut up and come back to the fold, but we'll let Claire tell the story. First things first, here's our boy, the man who wrote the book on the modern political campaign, Michael Cohen. Welcome back to the show, the man who wrote the book on the modern political campaign, Mr. Michael Cohen. How you doing, buddy?
Good to see you. Good to see you. How's baby doing? How's mom?
Baby is doing good. Baby is doing good. A lot of things happening here on the home front with developmental milestones. We're on the countdown to a smile. We're about 2 weeks away, apparently, from when she might start socially smiling, as they call it, and we're all thrilled. We're all waiting with bated breath.
Literally a life-changing event when they start smiling. It changes
I know. Well, that's what I've
how
heard.
you interact with them. Yeah.
Is they're like, hey, look, if you like them now, then when they start smiling, it's going to be easy. Like, there's just something about this, the thing that I've learned about fatherhood is that there's sometimes when you wake up and it's 3:00 in the morning and you're getting a bottle and you get handed the baby and you're just like, wow, this is the most lifelike movie animatronic I've ever seen. It's very precious. It costs a lot of money, and I really should make sure that it continues to keep functioning. But yeah,
and it's worth every dime. And
no, we're having a great time.
Better every year, buddy. It really does.
We're having a great time. Awesome. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the polling environment, because this is something that I think is probably more fundamental to a lot of the top line conversations that we have about polling, which at this point is probably, in this part of the cycle, the dumbest it's going to get in our 4-year cycle, right? As somebody who spent his life in this, like, when, especially now in a social media era, when every poll is treated like a football score and everybody is jumping up and down if they are winning by 1 or 2. This is the dumbest it gets, right?
It is the dumbest it gets. This is not Georgia, Alabama. I mean, this is not something like that you're going to watch on Saturdays or Sundays or if you're like me, you're looking forward to the MLB playoffs, and then about whatever sport you're watching. I mean, it isn't that. What we're looking at in the political environment, and I think you sent me a really interesting piece from my former suitors, our friends over at the Gallup poll, where I started my career.
Yes.
Great piece by Jeff Jones, who I've known for decades. I actually worked with him when I was at Gallup. Very smart guy. So it was an interesting piece, and I encourage you to link to the notes and for people to read it. What it basically says is that all the major indicators point red. And so it goes through party ID and all these other things. The one thing that I was actually really interested in seeing, and this is a sort of a blind spot for Gallup, and being somebody who worked at Gallup, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. They're pretty high on their own supply. Okay. To use something
they are Gallup with a capital G, and they will do
Gallup
things the Gallup way.
And in fact, Gallup with a capital GALLUP. Right.
Gotcha. Yeah. All caps Gallup.
Yeah, they no longer do GALLUP. It's all caps Gallup. And I think what we need to understand is that when you look at these polls, and when you look at any polls at this point, is the margin of error really is important. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when I looked at this, I first of all was struck by the graphic didn't even show the margin of error. Usually with most polling outfits now, they will show when it was conducted and the margin of error. You actually have to hunt for the margin of error in this one, which I thought was a little concerning. And when I looked, you end up at 1,007 adults, which is fine, but not especially extraordinary. And what you end up with 1,000 people is you end up with a 3.5 plus margin of error just on the stats itself, and then you add in all the other kinds of errors that you might get from a poll. So this isn't an extraordinarily great poll that compared to other polling operations like even Morning Consult and others who are taking much larger sample sizes, because what they want to do is they want to look at smaller groups with higher statistical power. So when I look at things, for example, like party identification and leaning, and in that graphic that they have where they said party measure favors Republican, well, it's only +3.
Yeah.
Okay, so to me, that's essentially a wash. It's within the margin of error. Party better able to handle the most important problem, it's +5. Okay, that's outside the margin of error, but it's not dominant. Okay.
Yeah.
And you go down and you go down to all of these things where you go party better to keep America prosperous, party favorability ratings, all the way through, and you're sort of like on the cusp of a marginal Republican slant in the environment right now, which I think is reflective of the fact that the incumbent is not popular and has been driven from the race. And so I don't know that this poll of polls, or at least this explainer, really tells us a lot more than we thought we knew, but it does give context for what we're seeing, which is a very tight election, not only nationally, but also in other areas. I think what's more interesting to me, and we'll get into this, I know you and I, because we have these conversations all the time, is who is Kamala Harris's base voter?
Yes.
We already know who Trump's base voters are. This is now his third time running for election, so we're pretty settled on who his coalition is. We're not settled on who the Harris-Walz coalition is. And when you look at it compared to comp for comp, 2020 to 2024, she doesn't have the Biden coalition. So if you're Kamala Harris right now, you are literally building it while you're on the runway.
In the air, yeah.
And now you're in the air because you've already gone through the debates. And so the question really is, how much do you want to replicate of what it was in 2020, and how much do you think you can get more? And when you look at the demographics, places where you think that she would over-index, she's not necessarily over-indexing on. So black voters, you would imagine she would have a much larger lead than Joe Biden. As it turns out, experience matters, and Joe Biden built that relationship with black voters over decades.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. And Kamala Harris has not, even though she has lived a life that, is a black life, right? I mean, she went to a black, historically, black college.
Black college. I mean, she was in a prominent black sorority. Yeah.
Prominent black sorority. She went through busing. I mean, there's a lot of things that she can draw on. I mean, she's black, right? And so what's striking is that with that group, she's not over-indexing on black voters. In fact, she's actually behind. And on white working class voters, and you go down the line of these things, it really gets to the point where you're like, okay, well, who is a Kamala Harris voter?
Well, we're going to circle back on that. I do want to just talk about what the top line of that Gallup thing that I sent you was, and that was with leans, Republican ID was +3, which whatever we think of the salience of that poll, it was, what I found was interesting was that they have taken this same poll in the third quarter of election years for decades, and they've never found an R+3, at least in the findings that they presented that stretched back to George Bush in 2000. The last time that it was
striking.
That it was favorable, that it's never been favorable in their findings. It was tied in 2004, the last time that a Republican won the popular vote. So I look at that, and I'm like, and I'm not a studied, learned man, let alone a practitioner in the field like you were. So I'm like,
come on. Yeah.
I'm a ragamuffin. I'm out here. I'm a streetwise. Right? I'm a streetwise hep cat. Yeah.
I'm just. I'm gonna kill you.
But I wonder. Okay, is this And for those of you who are not aware, the environment is essentially what the popular vote would be, right? And so over the last several cycles, Republicans have not won a popular vote. And so therefore, when you are polling for these races, you poll for the idea, if you're doing a national poll, that it will lean Democratic. It would be D+2 or 3. But this is where a lot of fights on election Twitter get into, and polling Twitter get into, are like, oh, well, this is an oversampled D+5 poll, so of course Kamala Harris is leading it, blah, 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 blah. This would suggest, and granted, your point is margin of error, this could be anywhere in reality from R0 to R3, that, maybe some of the polling here should be leaning more to either an even environment or, according to Gallup, a Republican-leaning environment. Beyond whether or not you think it's right, what are the challenges when you're polling in coming up with that environment? Just describe the difficulty in how you are trying to capture something like that.
Yeah, I mean, part of this really comes down to like how Gallup went ahead and did their poll. I mean, we don't really have great information at this point on their methodology. The best political polling right now that is done by political firms that does not get reported to everybody, that is given, very quietly to their candidates and slipped to certain media outlets when it's good. That is basically done off of voter rolls. Okay, so you're sampling off of voter rolls. Gallup has been very reluctant to go down that road. Pew did, and I think Pew is doing better because of that. And so I think there's some sort of technical things underneath the hood that I think might be at play here. But let's just take it at face value. If you're at +3 Republican, what that means is that it's a much more difficult environment for you to run a campaign if you're a Democrat, right?
Yes.
Now, if you look at this compared to 2020, it was a much better environment if you were a Democrat than it is now. And so that changes the game. Not only do you have to build a broader coalition and a deeper coalition, but you have to start over-indexing on some of these groups that are going to vote for you. So, for example, if you are counting on young women to vote, for example, which is the younger you go, the less likely someone is to vote, because it's a learned behavior over time, right?
Yeah.
So the more you do it,
a lot of things are going on when you're young. You might even, the Tuesday could mean a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tuesday can mean Taco Tuesday, and
exactly.
if you're doing Taco Tuesday, that's sometimes more important than voting. And if you hadn't voted before, I mean, you might miss Taco Tuesday. You don't want to do that. Yeah. But anyway, the point being is that if your coalition is dependent on voters that you're not sure if they're going to show up or not, that's a big challenge, right?
Yeah.
Now, the Democrats know that they have opportunities, with younger voters, particularly young women of childbearing age. And so the younger you go, the more difficult it is to predict whether or not they're going to show up. And so my question on some of these polls is like, who are they anticipating showing up in November?
Yeah.
And we could be surprised by a wave one way or the other, right? We could say, well, abortion's a big issue. Oh my God, women didn't show up and Donald Trump is president, right?
Yeah.
Particularly who are younger. Or, oh my God, if you look at some of these college towns, they're blowing it out, and Georgia flips, once again to Democrats. So what this tells a campaign is that you are in a tight race, and that every vote counts, and you need to be, every day that you have left is 34 days left. You should be fighting everywhere you possibly can and not resting. And to be honest with you, I found over the past couple of weeks the Harris-Walz campaign to be somewhat lackadaisical. They haven't been as aggressive as they were in the lead up to the convention. I thought that they were very smart with every single day, maximizing their potential every single day. There are days where Kamala Harris disappears from the stage.
Yeah.
At this point, you cannot do that at this point. You cannot cede the day to Trump, no matter what he's doing, whether it's crazy or whether it's positive for him. You need to have a strategy for every single day, and I don't know that they have that right now. And I think that within this environment right now that does skew slightly Republican, it presents other challenges for them. So in a normal election where they might have some, whether it's parity or even a slight edge, this is a much more difficult race for them. So, for example, like last time in 2020, it was a much better environment for Democrats. So Joe Biden didn't need to campaign outside of his basement, right?
Yeah.
Whereas right now, you feel like, okay, if Kamala Harris is not somehow living in these battleground states, if she's not spending tons of time in Atlanta, to your point, the last time we talked, that's political malpractice. So she should not be wasting a single moment. Neither should Tim Walz. He should have gotten the hell out of New York as soon as he possibly could last night and not stop for pizza. Okay, you should get the hell out of there and get yourself to a state that actually matters in this election.
Yeah, when Kamala Harris is in San Francisco for a fundraiser and Tim Walz is taking pictures in George Soros' son's penthouse, it's like, what do you guys need more money for? You already have more money than you can spend in this. They're transferring cash to down ballot races for like next cycle. Like that never happens. You never do that in a presidential election. But the money is just so ridiculous. What are you raising more money for?
No. She needs to be talking to voters at this point. She needs to be closing deals with coalitions of people that she's not equaling Biden or over-indexing over Biden. So, for example, like she's actually not doing as well with Hispanic voters. I mean, if you're looking at some of these southern border states that you're planning on somehow winning, like they did last time, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you see that as a problem, which everyone does, okay, visibly a problem for Kamala Harris, what are you doing every day? Why aren't you talking to that population?
Well, she went to the border on Friday.
Yeah, but like, to say what, right?
To say the thing that she says about the border, that Donald Trump spiked a bill in the Senate one time.
Right. So she did the thing, and did she talk to any voters? I mean, she talked to Border Patrol people. It was a photo op, right? And so, like, she needs to actually talk to voters. Like, where are the viral moments of her talking to voters? She needs
to be at a taqueria in McAllen, Texas, chopping it up somewhere. But that's not really her strength, right? Like, and this is part of the limitations of Kamala Harris as a candidate. Like, Joe Biden would love, a more cogent Joe Biden, he would love stuff like that. He'd have to get pulled out of whatever Mexican restaurant you threw him in. Yeah. But she's at least has not demonstrated a tremendous love for getting in the middle of anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you see it also in Pennsylvania. Like, Pennsylvania is tied, okay? And Pennsylvanians are very much like, you need to be there and be on the ground. I mean, our friend Tom LoBianco is reporting from there lately. I mean, she should be out there constantly. And if it's not her, then Tim Walz should be making this kind of move. If you believe that Tim Walz is that guy who could
is the whisperer. the Midwest guy whisperer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The knucklehead. I can't imagine that was a good.
Do you
moment.
have any takes? We wanted to do this after the debate, so we didn't have to talk about it or preview it. But if you have any thoughts, I think we were texting afterward. I think we both thought that both of them came off well. Vance probably the better winner on margin because he had such low expectations going in. But Walz slow start that he got his quotables by the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're listening to Amy Klobuchar last night in the spin room where she's bragging about minute 90, I mean, you didn't do great. Okay, sorry. If you're at minute 90 and you're looking at the 1-6 thing, that you know that Vance is not going to answer because of who he's running with. I mean, it was very predictable what he was going to do. I think what was also very predictable, and you and I went back and forth on this for the benefit of our listeners and viewers. We both, within seconds, wrote literally the same thing to each other, which was
before the debate.
Before the debate, we expected that Vance would actually do very well because he was so undervalued, and he did. And we also expected that Vance was overvalued. Walz was overvalued, and he was. And I think what it really comes down to is this: is that Vance was very much in his element. He answers questions very cogently, right? He knew he was prepared. He's a smart guy. People forget how incredibly smart this guy is.
Yeah.
I mean, not only forget the Yale stuff, but how sensitive of a book Hillbilly Elegy was about his upbringing and how dead center interesting it was. I mean, this guy is a lot deeper than the memes and even his clips. The Democrats have done a very good job of framing who he is. I think last night he took his own narrative back. I think that he put himself in a position for 28, excuse me, maybe even 32. He that's the guy that they thought they were getting when they put him on the ticket. And I think that when Walz went on, it was very clear he was extremely uncomfortable in the situation. When you don't do a lot of media interviews and you don't take a lot of questions, all of a sudden this becomes a very new thing for you. And on top of that, he just wasn't as skilled. To be able to parrot off things like Tiananmen Square, I mean, he had to have known that was coming.
I don't know how he doesn't have, because he had the same thing with the CNN interview with the IVF and military service, which, by the way, a gift by CBS that they didn't ask him about those two things, because those are far more well known in the public square than the whether or not he was in China 3 months after Tiananmen Square or during Tiananmen Square. But they didn't ask him about that.
He's so easily flustered, and that was an interesting situation where, like, you kind of got him, and instead of just saying, "Hey, I blew it," I done goofed.
I done goofed.
I done goofed. And just move on, then pivot to something that is more important.
It's like when I say Tiananmen Square, I mean the fallout of it, because I got there, people were still dealing with it, and that's what I meant by Tiananmen Square. Like that's not even a hard, because that's not as bad as the deployment, the where you actually have people.
Significant question, yes.
Yes. Where you have people who are mad at him that had to go to war, and the IVF thing, which shows a casual nature of like, oh, IVF was a big thing, so now I'm going to say that my kids were via IVF. Like that shows more of a casual disregard of the truth. He wasn't able to deal with any of those, and I think part of that's because he comes out of an environment that's not particularly hard on Republicans. The Minnesota media is Minnesota nice. I believe 2 of their debates that happened in the last cycle were done with public radio, to give you a sense of the teeth that the conservatives have in Minnesota.
Really hardcore, yeah.
But to Vance's point, and this is something that I remember talking to you about when they introduced Walz, and this was at the peak of Kamala mania, right? Like, Brett Summer fell out of a coconut tree. The progressives love her. They haven't gotten mad at her yet. Tim Walz was, not Josh Shapiro. She's going to be more progressive. She's really charting a bold course. Everybody's in love with Kamala at this moment. And the thing that Vance did, and if Trump wins this election, I think that it's going to be credited to him, is that he went out there and did press conferences that got live television, every
Local.
stop, every single day.
Local. Yeah.
And local, yes.
Yeah, the key there, and I think that this is the thing that Harris and Walz have kind of left on the table, and that Vance has done an extraordinarily good job of doing. He takes questions. And he also understands that the media moves on from whatever you say. Even if you blow it, you get points for trying.
Yes.
And if you're on local news, like that's a big deal because the people who are interviewing you have high credibility, much higher credibility than the national media, because they're telling you what's going on in your community. And so if you are out there and taking questions from the local people, that's a proxy for local voters. And that's a huge piece of this. And I think you're right. I think Vance does get some credit for that. I also think, to be honest with you, last night, it seemed to me that Vance was better at explaining Trump than Trump was explaining Trump.
Yes.
And so
he was better than Pence at explaining Trump, which was previously the high watermark for explaining what Trump actually meant.
Yeah, you always felt like there was a halting hesitance in Pence's voice, which was, gotta hate how this guy said it, but here's what he's trying to say. Whereas Vance is like, no, he actually saved Obamacare.
Yes.
Okay. No, he actually, his crazy is what kept these crazy people in check.
Yeah.
He was able to frame it by saying, look, yeah, I get that you don't like him, but this is the effect of how Trump operates, and this is how it was good for you. We have fewer wars. We are not concerned about we were not concerned about Israel being hit by Iran. Now today we are, right?
Well,
and
I mean, it's happened twice.
Clear on that issue. Yeah, and he's extraordinarily clear on those issues. And I think to a real extent what he did was he sort of mainstreamed Trump. And so if you are a young male voter of color and you're looking at this and you're saying, well, dude with the beard seemed fine. Like, he's fine with Trump. Like, why shouldn't I be okay with Trump? I feel like that there's a lot of...
I wonder, actually, I think, I wonder who that gateway structure is. Because I don't know whether or not it's, I saw some of the, not the staunchly never Trump voices, but some of the, I'm not going to vote for Trump, but I'm also not going to stump for Harris kind of voices that were like, oh my God, J.D. Vance was a breath of fresh air. Oh my God, I'm really excited that the post-Trump world looks more like what it did last night than what it did a few weeks ago. I don't know. I'm still of the mind. I'm not going to be prisoner of the moment and say that event mattered at all whatsoever. I think I said on our post-debate show that I think Donald Trump almost getting killed in Pennsylvania has maybe 100% more effect on the final ballot than anything that J.D. Vance says or said in terms of the salience to win this election, especially in Pennsylvania. But at the same time, I do wonder whether or not if Vance is cogent and he can make Donald Trump saying concept of a plan sound like he's Tip O'Neill, the greatest, law crafter of all time, then... is that more to the suburbs? Is that more to the waffling Georgia suburban voter who was like, oh God, I'm out on Trump, even a tax cut. It's not worth it to recommend Trump. But then I hold my nose one more time. He's out of my life forever. And if that's what comes next, sure. I'm okay with it. I guess that's my question is whether the Never Trump coalition right now, because I think that there's a portion of it that have just, I think they're just permanently Democrats. I don't think that they're ever really going to come back to the Republican Party. And that's what happens in coalitions. People kind of move over the line and drift. But I don't know if that's everybody, and I don't know what portion of it is. I know all the media that is made for Never Trumpers are functionally, they're a Biden Harris boosters right now.
Yeah, I think if you're a Never Trumper, this is your last election. I mean, because Trump is not going to run again in 4 years if he wins or loses, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that this is your last Never Trump election, and how many of those people end up staying Democrat and how many of those end up going back to being Republicans? I don't know. I mean, I think you'd have to really do a deep dive into that coalition and that coalition by, what's really important to them. So I don't know. For example, let's say that Trump loses and Vance is the nominee in 2028, right?
Yeah.
So the question then is are you never Trump enough that you hold Vance accountable for his movement, to Trump in from 20 to 2024. And I think you end up in a spot probably where you don't feel great about it, but it starts to recede, right? And it probably takes 1 or 2 elections for it to recede, and maybe people sort of snap back. I mean, it's very conceivable, for example, that a Nikki Haley, gets the nomination in 28. Well, actually, it's not. I mean, that's somebody other than Nikki Haley, because Nikki Haley's done. Okay, she should be serving on corporate boards and all that. But somebody else gets the nomination, and you say to yourself, okay, well, where were you when, right? And if that answer is, well, I've thought about this, and in my soul, I understand that I had problems at the time, but I really probably should have said that the election was not stolen and move on, right? You might be able to even pivot a little bit away from that and probably bring back some, of the Never Trumpers. But I honestly think that at this point, the Never Trumpers is not really where the game is being played in this election.
I mean, but it is for Harris and Walz, right? It appears, at least to me, that's the demo that they are gunning for. When Tim Walz says our coalition stretches from Taylor Swift to Dick Cheney, to me, that is directed right to that suburban voter that has been drifting leftward for the last 3 cycles and are particularly repulsed by Donald Trump.
Yeah, but that was that was like in the 80th minute, and it was
sure. But I mean, the decisions they're making, they're not going leftward.
No, but Vance was also like, well, we have Tulsi Gabbard and we've got the brain worm.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, they were sort of like parroting back their bona fides on we've got 2 people over here.
Big Tent.
We got Big Tent, right? Yeah, we're both Big Tent, parties. So, I mean, look, there's nothing on the planet that would get me as an ever Trumper to vote for Trump at this point, right?
Yes.
So, but next time around, I mean, you're looking at this and you're going, wow, this is a reset to the way politics used to be, and I'm happy that that's going to be the future, right? Because if you look at this and you say, well, the future is some kind of situation where we have 2 candidates, one that maybe I agree with more than the other, or it's a much more difficult decision, or at least they're being respectful and their wives are talking. I mean, this is like good for America. Like I walked away from the debate, and the bottom line that I walked away from the debate is that this was good for the candidates. It was good for CBS. It was good for both parties. It was good for both candidates at the top, and it was good for America. So I think it was just a really good night. Now, the fact of the matter is, tonight's another night. So to me, it's like, when you look at these things, you're like, okay, this is an event. How much does this change a trajectory? And it won't, because they both had good nights.
Not at all.
Right?
Yeah.
They both had good nights, and they both had situations where they were tripped up a little bit. If there's one person who probably wins, it's Vance, because he had the most to gain.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really change the race. But it may change how we all feel, right? It may change how we all feel about what might come next after this. We have one more time to go through this. We've got 34 days left. And then maybe we end up shifting back to where politics was more of a, inside the lines kind of game.
Our Democratic friends. As soon as J.D. Vance dropped our Democratic friends, I was like, whoa, we're back. We're in the Wayback Machine now. This is like might as well Lawrence Welk might start playing in the background.
I mean, honestly, I was looking for the bro hug at the end. I mean, I was like, oh, you know what, man? We had this discussion.
Good job, dude.
Let's go out and get pizza together. Let's go. Let's get a beer and get pizza together. Yeah, I know. It was very strange. I'm teaching this class on digital political strategy at Hopkins, and the last time I asked my students, I said, okay, pick out something substantive, something viral, and then something weird, and I nailed it. I said to them last night, I don't know if this is going to go weird or not. It seems like all the incentives probably isn't for it to go weird. But look at the substance and tell me what you think. And so I think the next discussion that I have with my students will be, The weird thing is that this was totally normal.
That either of them hit him on anything, and that's like the last thought I had before I went to sleep, because I'm an absolute psycho that thinks about these things probably too much, is that it's like, man, but can we also do another version where they're mean to each other? Because like both of them are really good at being mean. That's the other thing, is that like Walz is really good at slamming people, and Vance in that Tim Ryan debate that I went over, which was previously his only other debate, he tore Tim Ryan apart. He was really impressive with being on offense, and how Tim Ryan was a hypocrite and was taking pharma blood money and stuff like that. But they were both really good at like offensive quotables. And look, it's better for society that we got the election that we got. It may not be better
for Justin, but it's better for society.
No, just do another one. I'm saying, no, I'd like keep that one. Maybe can I pay on pay-per-view and just have another...
Have the director's cut, please. Right.
I want off the books, right? Let's just see if we can get two gigantic mega donors on either side of the aisle. We'll bring them out to international waters, and we'll just have one debate where they're mean to each other.
So you want Rocky and Apollo with the lines and no cameras? Right?
Yes, you want that there fight. We go. I want Tim Walz to say you're a sniveling little incel, freeze frame, and on JD Vance's side, you're a sociopath who's never known the truth, and you're probably a commie agent. And I want that. Right. Yeah.
And the only one who gets to see past that first punch is you.
Oh, I love it.
No.
I'd love it. Okay, so last time that you were on, you gave us some good advice in terms of reading state polls. That any state poll that is under 800, that is something that you can pretty much just throw out. Only pay attention to state polls that are at 800.
Yeah.
From your point of view, this is something that also has gotten talked about a lot, especially in our age of models, where all the polls go into the machine and the machine spits out another number, right?
And this is actually what Gallup was trying to do, by the way. They were trying to sort of not really model, but it was like sort of a soft model. So, yeah.
Well, and that real quick on that, because the other thing that I've seen talked about a lot is the Washington state primary, in terms of also trying to figure out what the universe of voters are. And that, for people who are not terminally online, is
or dorks like me,
is when there's a primary in Washington state. If you average that and I think divide it by like 12 or something like that, then you get a number that has historically been predictive of the national environment for the presidential elect, or the election in November. And in that, it showed a D+ environment. I think it was like anywhere between like a D+3 or a D+4. Now, I don't know whether or not that's real. Certainly a lot of usually liberal election commentators are treating it like it's the gospel, but I don't know if it's essentially the same thing as, the Colts and the Bears playing each other every single presidential year, and the winning team is the determinant of the winner. It's just a data point that's been right enough over these 4-year cycles that if you flip the coin right 3 times, now all of a sudden we're going to treat it like it's the Holy Grail.
Yeah, I mean, look, how many times have you had an election where the nominee basically drops out, a few months before the election? I mean, 0. And so, I think we're in uncharted territory. I think normally what happens is you have enough time to see which voters are coalescing around which candidates. We know that for one candidate. We really don't know that for another candidate. So I'd be very careful about models at this point. I mean, look, the best models right now will show you it should be a tight race. It's going to be a tight race. Just understand it's going to be a tight race. Like that's what you should say. It's a coin flip race. If you were, looking at Alabama, Georgia, it's a coin flip game, right? And so, in this situation, it's a coin flip race.
Alabama, Georgia, the football game, not Alabama and Georgia, the states that will vote in the election, for the record. Yeah.
No, definitely not. No, I'm definitely talking about football, because I can't talk about my Florida Gators anymore because they suck.
Whoa.
So I have to
but at least Florida State sucks worse. You have that going for you.
Well, that you can model whether or not we're going to be able to beat them or not, right? So when you're starting to look at like those kinds of things, like it's the same kind of thing in sports, right? They're modeling like how the win possibility, right? And right now, the win possibility for the Gators is probably 54-45. But going into that game, we'll see what it looks like, after, I've got people in my group chat, my Sons of Spurrier group chat, who are telling me we're going to win 5 or 6 games and they're on fucking crack. Sorry, Brian. Sorry, you're on crack. We're not going to win 5 or 6 games. We're losing like 3 or 4 max. And so, like, if we win 5 or 6, all of a sudden those models will go crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of thing can go in politics as well, right? So if you have, let's say the next week, for whatever reason, Kamala Harris is everywhere. She's releasing all kinds of ideas for, groups that she needs to win. She's having really great interviews. She does a 60 Minutes interview, and it's incredible. It's Kamala Harris like you've never seen her before. Or she has this viral moment where she's talking to somebody on the street, and you're like, oh my God, Kamala Harris talking to a normal person? That's crazy. Or like Donald Trump gets up and talks about, his existential feelings about being shot at twice, right? And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that guy's got a heart somewhere. And all of a sudden you can
he's got the Butler rally. He's got the Butler rally coming up.
Yeah, but it's a rally.
Does Trump cry at the Butler rally?
Trump doesn't cry ever. Yeah. But I mean, or like, there could be a situation where, let's say, Melania releases her book early, and the last line of the book is "Fuck you, Donald, I'm out." I mean, there's a world on Earth 5 where that happens, right?
Where this happens, yeah.
Or where Doug, we find out that Doug was banging strippers, and then all of a sudden, we now have a Kamala Harris problem, with Doug. And I don't know. The point is like, if you start having situations where there might be something big happen, that can change the models as you're going through.
Yeah.
Kind of like when you're playing a game and if someone throws a touchdown, all of a sudden the models of you winning go up or down. So I think I'd be very careful about watching the models. I'd be very careful about interpreting polls that are +5 anywhere, outside of, a battleground state. So, from my perspective, I mean, this is a coin flip election. I've been saying that for the past few months. It is still a coin flip election.
Nothing has changed materially. And you don't buy the idea that consistent leads of 1 or 2 in like Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania matter at all.
Nothing. No, nothing. Because it easily could be explained by people coming in or out of the sample. And it could also be easily explained by day of the week on who's voting and who's available for that poll. I mean, it's pretty clear when you look at the patterns of demographics, like who shows up for polls based upon day of week. I mean, so for example, lower income people are much more likely to work on weekends in service industry. And so like if you are not doing polls over a weekend, including, let's say, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or even longer to Wednesday, which is what I would prefer at this point, you're probably missing people based upon when they work and when they're home.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's sort of a known thing for a while that if you're going to do political polling, you have to do it based upon where people are. And for example, what we learned during the Trump years is that education was actually a big crosstab to look at. That it wasn't just gender or those kinds of things. It was also education, and education also tracks with when you work. And so if you're not catching people at night, if you're not catching people on the weekends for polls, you're probably missing a segment of people. And flip side, if you're not catching them during the week because they are working at night or on weekends, it's actually a sort of a known thing in polling that you're probably missing people. So you have to expand the window of when your polls are available, and make sure that when those polls are completed, it varies enough during the time of day so that you're not getting people who are all at home on the couch watching Fox News or MSNBC.
One last thing at the door. October surprises. We have at least 2 early possibilities, and that is the cleanup and eventual recovery of Hurricane Helene and anything that might come out of that. So something more along the lines of, at the worst case, that you are hoping to avoid for Biden and Harris, a Katrina level or Hurricane Sandy level situation. I guess Hurricane Sandy probably be the best case because that happened during the 2012 election.
Right.
Katrina, which didn't happen during the election, would be on the worst case. And then this possible all-out war between Israel and Iran. This is going to air on Friday. We're recording it on Wednesday. So if anything happens on Wednesday night, Thursday, or Friday morning, then understand that we're not obviously going to talk about it. But my sense of this is these are very much liabilities for Harris, if only because even if they're not terrible, like the worst case scenario doesn't happen, it is a consistent reminder that she is currently in the administration and she can't run away from it, because what I think she would love to do, and she has often done, is start talking about on day one, and we're going to have bold new leadership. She wants to run as an outsider while sitting inside the administration. With these things, she can't, right? She has to talk about, I'm in the Situation Room, I'm dealing with this, I am part of the recovery. Your thoughts?
It's the perils of being an incumbent. Whether she likes it or not, she's an incumbent. So whatever's going on, the incumbent has to deal with it. And Trump will have fewer things to show because, I mean, everything that we ever wanted to know about Trump and didn't want to know about Trump, we already know. He's already been president. There's really nothing else to know. So anything that happens can move, as far as an October surprise is concerned. I don't think that, for example, this Helene terribleness will move people one way or the other. It seems at this point that the administration is functioning the way it should be. And it seems like the governors the Republican governors are saying that they're getting the help that they have requested. So even though Trump tried to play that up a little bit, it sort of, fell flat. So unless you have a Katrina level, show of incompetence, it's hard to see that as being an issue. So I think, there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, And so the question really is like, what are we looking at in October? We do know that what's going on in the Middle East is difficult. We do know also that Ukraine is difficult. So what if Ukraine collapses? What if Russia overruns Ukraine? What if there is another terrorist attack, on the United States? There are things that.
That's the big thing that is too macabre to plant my flag in, because it would be gross. Is some kind of mass violence event from somebody that came over the border. Like that would be whether it be gang violence, whether it be something, just some kind of big ugly thing for which you say, okay, well, this dude came over in 2002 and was released by Border Patrol. Like that is a huge liability.
Yeah, it is. All the liabilities are on the Democrat side. I think the Republicans can basically run out the clock and just not do stupid things. And, they're walking into it with not a substantial lead, but that's certainly close to a lead. If you really look at the data and the preponderance of the data, you would say, if I had to make a bet, Trump probably would win. I think that's basically news at this point. If you were pushed to make a call, but you easily could be talked into.
You're going to push all your crypto in on Polymarket. I know you're a big crypto guy, Cohen.
Yeah, that's right. Me, Captain Crypto over here. Yeah, I've got all the NFTs.
Crypto King.
I've got all the Trump NFTs, and I've got the gold watch on.
Oh yeah, the 10K gold watch.
No, 100K. It's
100K. Let's upgrade.
I've mortgaged my house for the gold watch because it's obviously going to go up in. So I don't know. I think it is too macabre to really figure out like what the October surprise is going to be. There is a couple court cases still hanging out in the ether. Is another.
I think the biggest thing is whether or not Jack Smith's evidence is made public, because he has to file that with the judge. But even then, it's like, what else can we learn about January 6th that we haven't already learned?
Yeah,
right?
I think you look at natural disasters, terrorist attacks, all court cases, other things, marital issues, other weirdness. But I feel like this thing is baked. It is baked, and we just don't know what it's going to taste like, on Election Day. And frankly, it's going to probably go a few days past Election Day before we actually have, a potential winner. Then we're going to have court cases that are probably going to go one way or another, depending upon who wins. To be honest, if the Democrats lose, it wouldn't surprise me if they ran some court cases, in spots where they were concerned. Yeah, so I think everyone's
old enough to remember 2000. Yeah, it is certainly within the capacity of the Democratic Party to file lawsuits about whether or not elections are fair in their mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, I mean, there will be, voter intimidation, court cases if they lose. There will be fraud cases if they win. I mean, so I think we're into the extended period going up to, probably Thanksgiving. When we finally have an answer, or at least some semblance of a way forward, quote unquote. But I think it's going to be a very tight election. And I think we knew this going in.
Yeah.
It is a more competitive election than it would have been if Biden stayed in. I think it wouldn't have been this close. I think you and I would be talking about down ballot races today.
We'd be talking about the New Mexico Senate race.
We talk about New Mexico. We would be talking about
Jersey.
We'd be talking about Tester, basically packing his bags and going home.
Well, I think Tester is already gone. Tester's gone now.
His bags are packed. I mean, you and I would actually be talking about Cruz, who, you and I have been talking about this for a while, that this has been 3 points now, right? So
I don't think it's real. I don't think it's real.
I know you don't think it's real. I know.
Think it's real.
So I think
I'm just saying I'm just telling you from.
I think it's Cruz plus 5. That's where we end up. It's Cruz plus 5.
My zip code here in Austin, which was a Biden 85% voting zip code in 2020. So this is a liberal powerhouse. This is where you're banking votes, right? There are not as many all red signs as I think there are still Beto signs on people's lawns. People loved Beto so much. They loved Beto so much. And all red is
incredible. Yeah.
Now, look, maybe that changes. And there's a lot of Harris Walls coverage. So it's not like people aren't putting signs out, but they're not like, in my opinion, you need that Beto surge. And Beto came close, like that Beto surge of like, no, this is it. This is the generational moment. We're all going to do it. Texas is going to flip blue. I don't think it's going to happen on the top side of the ticket, but I do think, maybe look, Cruz runs, I think it's like 5 points behind generic Republicans in Texas. Like he is a less popular Republican in the state. Yeah. He's gettable. I don't think Allred has run a bad campaign in that. I don't think that he's done the Beto thing where he just threw problems on his plate that he didn't need to, but it's a hard environment, it's especially with the shifting coalitions.
I think Cruz will owe his seat to Trump being at the top of the ticket, because I think Texas is going to vote for Trump. It's going to lift Cruz through. He probably wins between 4% and 5%, if not more.
I would say so.
And I think he wins. He wins to the point where he's not. He will still be the holy grail, to knock out
the fundraising cow, the cow that just
Speaking of
cup
money,
runneth over. By the way, just on the way out, we do have a tranche of polls from Cook Political Report, all of which fall exactly within the margin that we're talking about. Harris up 1 in Pennsylvania, 2 in Wisconsin, 3 in Michigan, tied in North Carolina, Georgia +2 for Trump, Nevada Harris +1, Arizona +2. Really the most interesting note here, because they also polled the Senate. Pennsylvania said it's Casey +7, which is about where it's been. But they have Baldwin Hovde at Baldwin +2. And that's the same as Trafalgar, who pulled the same race. So who knows whether or not, I don't know. The guest we're going to have coming on after you on this episode is my friend Claire, who has actually been on the ground reporting. Mm-hmm. She was in Dearborn and believes that there are major, major, major problems with Harris in Dearborn. Like they are.
Really?
It's over. According to her, at least the people she's talked to, they're like actively looking for her to lose. It's not just whether or not they want to stay home or that she hasn't earned the vote. They are mad about Kamala Harris.
What's the what's the reasons so far?
Well, spoiler alert for the episode that's about to happen, but or the interview that's about that you're about to hear. But they were very specifically upset by the fact that Harris has in no way really moderated. They thought Harris was going to be a reset from Biden. She has given them nothing but lip service. They didn't let a Palestinian speak during the convention, and those were the organizers of that movement. That turned out it was like 15,000 in the in the primary for uncommitted. So these are organizers who know how to turn out people, and then a lot of them were like, when she asked them, well, Trump with the travel ban, they're like, well, the travel ban, there were certain things that were put on. They knew the exact letter of the law of what it did and what it didn't, and they were fine with where it is or where it ended up, right? Okay. They have not forgiven the Patriot Act post 9/11. And they look at Cheney as a Darth Vader of that era, and they do not like that every Democratic candidate has been with a smile on their face talking about how awesome and great Dick Cheney is. That was, at least to the people that spoke to Claire, something that was, a calculated shift. And again, it's like, can we gain never Trumpers if we imperil Muslims, especially in Michigan? But what I wonder about when you're looking at polling in Michigan
for them
is like, all right, so let's say you've black-pilled all of Dearborn, right? And Dearborn, now you've got 15,000 people that are actively going to vote against you. How do you model for that? How do you model for that based on previous elections when that's been a solid Democratic block? Can you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the question that I would ask your next guest would be, are they going to actively stay home, or are they going to vote for Trump? Because if they stay home, that's one thing. If they're voting for Trump, that's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, she said that it's a split between Trump, uncommitted, and Stein.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Stein is definitely a natural place for them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably
I think she's posted up. She has a Muslim vice president. She's posted up in Michigan. She is looking to, and this time I think the gloves are off, where she's not going to be tiptoeing around like, ooh, am I a spoiler? She's like, no, I'm trying to spoil this election for you.
Yeah.
There's an electorate
exactly
that wants.
It's Nader did in, in Florida, and so, I mean, easily could do this, right? And to me, like I've been talking about this for a while. I think Michigan's, been the biggest problem for Harris, basically because of what's going on in Gaza. She hasn't been able to figure out an answer to that, and even saying that Hamas was the problem and not the Palestinians, she's tried to sort of like triangulate that message in her speech. That seems to have not gone over well.
No.
Yeah. I feel like the folks who are pro-Palestinian are also pro-Hamas, and there's a lot of them, at least in Michigan.
Well, I think the push is everybody views this in their own lens, and again, this is the problem with the Middle East, is that everybody sees this version from their own point of view, and nobody forgets ever, right? So
no, and I don't either. I mean, we were talking earlier about like what might happen over the next few days. I mean, this is going to drop on Friday. I would tell you that tonight, sundown, is Rosh Hashanah. So I would actually be very shocked if over the next 3 days, which is good for your podcast, by the way, because I don't think there'll be any news. I think I would be very shocked if over Rosh Hashanah, the state of Israel attacks Iran.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they will take their time at a time and a place of their choosing, which means that they probably have until Yom Kippur is over. So you've got probably about 12 days before the next big response. But if there is a big response during this time, I think it actually will be difficult for Netanyahu politically internally. So I think that there's nothing going on there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we all view this through our own lenses, and I've been very open with mine. And so, I view this within the context of being a Jew and also as someone who has traveled to Israel. And so I understand the other side of it and how they view it. And it is, I mean,
my thing, and this is what I talked to Claire about too, but so we'll do a little double dipping, but my problem with the Democrat, well, number one, my largest problem with all of this is that I think that our State Department has been feckless. If you look at like what are our goals when we go into this? How are we achieving them? what has the last now year of us going to Qatar and Egypt and sitting in boardrooms with Israeli representatives and Hamas representatives and pushing paper between the two of them really done? Absolutely squat, right? It's led us into a situation where now, look, and maybe Israel was always going to go dismantle Hezbollah. Maybe Israel was always going to go do the Godfather, ending the Godfather, where they're just taking out all the leaders that they've wanted to take out for 20 years. Maybe that was always going to happen, but I don't see a world where we are, if what we want to do is get involved, the United States, and we want to play a broker of some kind of peace, I don't see what our point of view is. I don't see how we're getting to it. And I certainly know that politically, nobody's thrilled. I don't think anybody who's like extraordinarily pro-Israel looks at Harris and says, yep, you're doing great. And I don't think anybody who's pro-Palestinian looks at Harris and says, you're doing great. Everybody's mad. Everybody's mad at all sides of it. So you're not really reaping any benefit. You're just kind of hurting both sides.
Yeah, Justin, and this goes back to like what I was talking about earlier. Like, who is the coalition that's going to support Harris? And on this specific issue, she has found a way to piss off everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you're president of the United States, maybe that's the right place to be, right? Maybe, you're not going to be too far one way or the other. But on this kind of a thing where it's a live issue, okay? I mean, we're talking about live issue, live bombs, people dying. There's no way to sort of split the difference on these kinds of things. I mean, I see where she's trying to do, but it's not effective. It really isn't.
You can't. You can't.
You got to pick a side, and you got to decide, okay, I'm going to lose Michigan because I'm going to win Pennsylvania, right? Or I'm going to lose, this group because I feel like I'm going to get more from this group, And I think at some point you have to make a choice, and they didn't. And to your point, the State Department, their point of view seems to be ceasefire at this point. First it was nothing. First it was, okay, we just support Israel. Then it was, okay, ceasefire. And now it's, okay, who's to blame for no ceasefire? Well, okay, they continue to fight, then they continue to fight, and now these people are now fighting. Now they're fighting over here, now they're fighting over there. So it seems to me like the worst people in the world right now, if you want to wake up in the morning and be, is Tony Blinken, right? Blinken has done probably more damage to the reputation of the State Department over the past couple of years than probably anyone else. I mean, I can't think of a worse Secretary of State, and this includes the 3 or 4 that were Secretary of State, for Trump, than him. I mean, he's been able to accomplish literally nothing to the point where he's accomplished negative accomplishment at this point.
Yeah.
It's worse now than when he got involved, and you kind of scratch your head and you say, well, what actually are you trying to do? Like, what is the goal here? Just to stop the fighting? If your job is to stop the fighting, you have to understand why they're fighting, what the incentives for them to stop fighting are, and then broker some kind of a deal that gets people to the table that they're getting something as opposed to having to give everything up. It's pretty clear that whatever deals were on the table were either unpalatable to the Palestinians or unpalatable to the Israelis. And there was not enough in them for both of them to agree. So
you can't really make a deal with Hamas, right? Like, Hamas is an organization that nobody saw, not the United States, not the State Department, not Israel, right? If you're going to look at everybody but Iran and Hamas were aligned. Yes, Hamas should still be in Gaza forever and they should be running everything. But if you're trying to sit down with Hamas and say, okay, please put pen to paper on a deal. And oh yeah, by the way, make sure that those orders get radioed very specifically to the guy in a bunker who wants to either kill as many people of his own people and die for the glory of Allah. Like, make sure that he follows all this stuff too. And by the way, the Israelis will never, ever, ever agree to let him live. So good luck. Good luck. Figure that one out. Square that circle. Because if somebody can explain it to me, and all these very smart people in the State Department that are they're brilliant. They're the greatest statecraft people ever, apparently. But if you can explain to me how you're going to make that deal work, then I have something to learn. I've never been able to see how with those look, if you're talking to Saudi Arabia, if you're saying, hey, the Saudis they're going to essentially take over Gaza. They're going to put their own fighting force in. They're going to militarily do it. They're going to they're going to reform Hamas, blah, blah, blah. They're going to take Yahya Sinwar to, he'll be able to watch Cristiano Ronaldo play at their league or whatever, but they're going to take him. The Israelis won't like it. He's going to be a bloodthirsty person that killed a lot of Jews that will now live. They won't like it, but it's a piece. You do that, at least I understand it. At least it's a plan that I could see theoretically moving the ball forward. I've never seen how it's going to work with Hamas at the table. Like, I just never have.
Well, I mean, you just said, I mean, what you have to do if you're going to get out of this is you actually have to expand the deal.
Yes.
And make it bigger, as opposed to focusing on the two groups that won't cut a deal, right? So you have to bring in Jordan, you have to bring in the UAE, you have to bring in Qatar. I mean, you have to bring in all the other regional. It has to be a regional answer, as opposed to, just one-on-one. And so that's the problem, because the other people in the region, they don't want to touch this.
Nobody's wanted to. The only people who want to deal with it is Iran, because they want to have somebody next to Israel that is achieving their aims.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about the election for so long, right? And we were saying, okay, this was always going to be a tight election. The sort of fundamentals of this election are basically the same, right? The fundamentals of this conflict are essentially still the same, right? You still have the same groups of people who want to fight no matter what. You have in Israel a much more aggressive Israel, as opposed to a much more passive Israel willing to cut a deal. So when you have two groups that are basically hell-bent on being aggressive, it's really hard to get them to step down until they realize that the aggression on both sides no longer is profitable, right? And with Hamas saying, no matter what, we don't care who dies, that's good for us. And Israel saying, well, we have more people we want to take off the chalkboard. Then you're in a situation now where there really is no deal to be cut, and that's why you have a war. So eventually, these two groups have to get exhausted to the point where they feel like they've either accomplished their goals or lost so much that they can't fight on, and they have to get to that point, and that's why the Middle East is such.
Well, the rumor is that they believe that they've won in Gaza, and that Sinwar might be dead, or at least he hasn't been heard from in weeks. And so now that marks where they started looking northward, is that, like, they're not opening a second front as far as they're concerned. They're looking at a new front.
Taking care of all the family business to your godfather,
I mean, that's the crazy thing, is that
all the family business. Yeah.
Whatever Bibi heard in DC, because this all happened. He came to D.C., he talked to Biden, he talked to Harris, he gave that speech, and then he talked to Trump. Whatever he heard there, it was apparently enough for him to say, I don't have to pick up the phone every time I'm going to do something, because
I'm just gonna blow up walkie-talkies whenever I feel like it.
I'm gonna
do whatever I want.
Because they were burning. They burned the fact that Mossad is deep into the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That they were infiltrating the beepers. Like, this is a lot of stuff that I don't think in a perfect world Israel would love to tip to their enemies. They want to keep that for when it is something decisive. So it tells you that he thinks that this moment in time is a significant chapter in Iran and their proxies. All right.
I would also say, though, this,
all right, go ahead.
Let me close it off. I'm sorry.
Let's close it off. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that this is a significant moment for Netanyahu, right? Because I think Netanyahu sees this as very personal, and he's decided, okay, my window is going to close pretty soon because we've, quote unquote, won whatever we're going to win in Gaza. So what else can I do to build my legacy as the leader of this country? Okay, I'm going to take out Hezbollah,
Nasrallah,
and I'm also going to go ahead and take off. I think the last big thing will be the nuclear reactor in Iran, and so I would look for that in a couple of weeks to happen, which is a very difficult operation because it is a much more protected place than it was a couple of decades ago when they hit it, and I think that if he does that may be the last swan song for Netanyahu, and I think the government will probably fall relatively soon after that, because that'll be it. I mean, there's nothing else he could accomplish other than that. And I think for American politics, what does that mean? It just means that this is just going to be in the background, in the bloodstream, running through, communities like in Dearborn, Michigan, and others, like Long Island, New York, where I'm from. And so, it's just going to be in places in Northern Virginia. And it will affect the election on the margins, but it's not going to be the game changer that you and I were talking about and what we're going to expect as far as an October surprise.
All right. Michael Cohen, go get his book, Modern Political Campaigns.
Or wait until the beginning of next year when there's a second edition.
Buy both.
We're wrapping it up.
Buy both. Buy now, buy
both.
later.
Yeah.
It's like voting, vote early, vote often. All right, Michael, thank you so much.
All right, take care, brother.
I tell you, I have never voted for a Democrat. But this year, I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. Thank you. But mostly we're not going back.
That is Liz Cheney on stage during a speech that introduced Kamala Harris in Wisconsin. It was a unity rally, but I don't know if they're really coming from any different ideological perspective. I gotta say, there's been plenty of things in this election that have blown my hair back. I've never seen 2 assassination attempts on a candidate. I have never seen a candidate replaced that late in the process. And underrated is Kamala Harris running this campaign, I think, tailored to people that voted for George W. Bush, like Bush 2000, Bush 2004 voters. I'm going to encourage you guys, go out of your way to watch both Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris's speech, because there was a moment, let me see if I can actually get this here, this quote. I will strengthen, not abdicate, America's global leadership, says Kamala Harris as Liz Cheney vigorously claps behind her. She had previously thanked Dick Cheney. Aside from one very brief, we might not agree on everything, there was not even a moment in either of those speeches where it seemed odd that this was happening. There was no, can you believe it? Pigs are flying. It must be a cold day in hell because I'm on stage with the Democrats. Those two seemed like this is just the new Democratic Party. And should Kamala Harris win, you'd have to make the argument that that's who they're governing for. That's at least who they campaigned for. There's not a lot in the platform, and you're going to listen with Claire in a minute, that seems to be speaking to progressives at all. They are taking the progressive vote as an article of faith. Shut up. Get in the back. We're going to win this election. We're going to do it with Never Trumpers. We're going to January 6th our way to the White House. Wait, scratch that. We're going to talk about January 6th all the way into the White House. And that's what this is. And obviously, January 6th is a huge issue to a lot of people. I don't know how many of those people weren't voting for Kamala already. Don't know about that. But obviously, it is an issue that they believe is disqualifying for Donald Trump. And they spoke about it at length. And I think, it was a good Kamala Harris speech. But I don't know. It's moments today, days like today, as I am recording this on Thursday afternoon, that I just feel like I'm taking crazy pills, guy. I feel like I'm in the silly house. Ugh. Moving on. A tentative deal has been reached between the International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance, ending a port strike that began on Tuesday. The agreement extends the expired contract until January 15th, allowing workers to return to ports from Maine to Texas on Friday. The terms of the deal have not been disclosed. The union demanded a $5 per hour wage increase, while the USMX offered $3. The strike disrupted ports, imports, and exports, affecting the U.S. economy. President Biden refrained from intervening, urging both sides to negotiate fairly. The deal still requires union member ratification, but that seems to, at least for now, be off of the radar of the election. So all the labor heads, you guys follow this one. We're kind of done paying attention to it. I always thought that this was a distant third of the 3 issues that popped up this week. One of them being Hurricane Helene cleanup. The second being the wider war in Israel and Iran. You know, the international side of it, I think, is something that really, really erodes Kamala Harris's support from the left. The Helene stuff, I mean, look, this is something that she needs out of the news cycle. Because if it's still an issue that people are talking about, which it's probably going to be, at least in terms of the Trump campaign, then that's a problem. Because if people are talking about it, that means that things aren't going well. If things are going well, then people aren't going to talk about it. So obviously she wants things to go well there. But as for the economy being crushed by a dock worker strike, will not happen in time to affect votes. And if Kamala Harris and Dick Cheney up on stage, Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney up on stage, she did thank Dick, though. I mean, like, this is just breaking my brain, guys. To hear Liz Cheney up on a stage with the Democratic candidate for president as she talks about how awesome and amazing the Bush administration is, and everybody in the crowd is cheering. As somebody who was in college during that time, it just, I can't wrap my head around it. But if that's the shot, here's the chaser. The International Association of Firefighters has announced that it will not endorse a candidate in the 2024 presidential race, following a close membership vote. Despite backing President Biden in 2020, the union has remained neutral on the contest between Harris and Trump. IAFF President Edward Kelly emphasized the importance of unity within the union to advocate effectively for firefighters. The decision comes after the Teamsters, another major union, also chose not to endorse a candidate, with some local Teamsters chapters supporting Harris, but Trump winning a poll of the national organization. The AIFF aims to advance firefighter-related issues free of an endorsement. And we watch our coalition shift like so much plasma in a lava lamp, slowly but surely morphing from one thing to another. Unions used to be thought of as in the bag for Democrats, now are hurting Democrats by avoiding a endorsement for them. And Liz Cheney's on stage with the Democrats, talking about strong, muscular leadership abroad. I mean, like, there were times where that would be an entire A block of like a Bill Maher show. Dick Cheney or George Bush saying something like that. That would be like a whole A block of like, oh, your kids are going to die in war. That's what that means. And now it's cheered for the liberal side. Oh, man. Wacky, wacky, wacky. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. I love everybody who supports us there. I will have some news coming up. Just know that I love you. Just know that I love you, friends. Just know that I love you. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. And now, to our friend, Claire. Welcome to the show. One of my friends from the trail and somebody who's an actual reporter, not a dabbler, not a tourist like I do. I just go to the things that I want to go to. Somebody who's actually out there finding the news and bringing it both here and abroad. Claire Meynial from The Point, in a publication out there in France. How you doing, Claire?
Very well. How are you?
Now, I don't know where I want to start, because you've actually been pounding the pavement with this election. You have gone to some of the places that are very geographically interesting. One, because it's in a swing state, and the other because it was a very, very bizarre moment during the only debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And let's start there. Springfield, Ohio. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats in Springfield. You went out there. What was your reaction?
So first of all, it was really interesting because I could do a lot of interviews in French.
Really? Oh, yeah. Because of Creole, because of the Haitians.
Haitians. So Creole, I don't speak. I can, if I read it, I can sort of understand what it's about, but I can't speak it. It's probably the way you would feel if you try to understand Nigerian pidgin, for example. You sort of understand the theme, but you can't really speak it. But a lot of them actually do speak French. Those who don't, that gave me a good indication of how long they'd been in the U.S. And you have a lot of people who initially lived in Miami and were outpriced, and so they moved from Springfield. But the people who've been in the U.S. for 25 years, for example, it's actually a lot of people in Springfield, they don't really speak French anymore. Most of the other ones did.
So if they are more recently here from Haiti, then they speak French. Otherwise, it is more just the local dialect of Creole that Haitians speak amongst each other.
Yes, Creole and English.
So the Haitian community there is a mixture of people who got chased out of where Haitians in general live, which is Miami and New York City, and so they have settled here in a way that Ohio is littered with towns where various different ethnic minorities throughout the years have found one city that they're all going to move to. But the controversial element of this is the sudden influx of migration. How much of that is real from the conversations that you had?
So first of all, the numbers. It would be somewhere between 12 and 15,000 people, and they started arriving, let's say, in 2017. The thing is, Springfield is a perfect example of a city that was deindustrialized, the Rust Belt, in the 60s. And so I think the numbers are like there were 82,700 inhabitants in 1960, and then it went down to 58,600 in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, so the town is empty. It's very striking. You have those entire streets with vacant homes. So really, really striking. So the land and
because that used to be what, a steel area, a steel working area,
farming equipment.
Okay.
Printing plants, which this is a whole
do not exist anymore at the level that they once did in 1960. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the land and the buildings became so cheap that companies started coming back, and there was nowhere to work there. And so in 2014, the local government launched a program called Welcome Springfield 2014.
Okay.
And a lot of Haitians came. Now, you probably remember the big, what they call in Haiti, Goudou Goudou, which was the massive earthquake.
Yep.
In December 2010? No, January 2010.
Yeah.
Where it's estimated something like 220,000 people died, probably. I went there in December 2012. It was still a war zone.
Yeah, it's something that you learn from osmosis growing up in South Florida is that Haiti is a country that is simultaneously maybe the most unlucky country and also poorly managed country that has existed here in the Western Hemisphere. Not only is it so close to America, it's roughly the distance that Cuba or some of the other Caribbean countries are from the peninsula of Florida, but it's not even the most put together country on its own island. Hispaniola is the full island. The Dominican Republic is on the other side. And for whatever you could say about the Dominican Republic, and trust me, it's not Epcot, right? Like, this is not a utopia. It's a North Korea, South Korea difference between those two countries.
It's so weird to think it's actually the same land. Exactly. So the Haitians came en masse, and as you know, they came.
Now, this was through what? This is a program by the federal government?
No, the local government, helping
Okay.
immigrants to settle. Just
Gotcha.
and you also have Mexicans, but the community that you see the most are Haitians, and that's also because they can come in through TPS, which, as you know, is a 1990 act. So that's the Bush era,
Yep.
and so they can come in and work legally.
Yeah. So this begins in 2017, you were saying?
When I spoke to a few NGOs that helped them, they were saying that the first ones really arrived in 2017. And
Okay.
then I don't know if you've worked on immigration stories before. I used to do that a lot in West Africa. It's just the phone number you have. If you have someone to call, you just go.
Yeah.
Your friends tell you, hey, here you could actually have a house, and there are lots of jobs. So people started going.
Yeah. Was there a larger influx during the Biden administration? We've obviously seen a lot of the controversy at the border with their asylum system. From what I understand, this is not that. They are not coming in the same way that the southern border crossers are. This is a legal system, but there is a controversy of whether or not maybe the gas got hit a little bit too fast for a city that is still recovering or growing at whatever speed. Is that something that bore true to you?
I really don't know. I guess it's more a question of a certain level, 15 to 12 to 15,000 people out of a population of 58,000 today. That's a very visible community.
Yeah.
They have 2 restaurants in some streets. That's one of the things that people say. You will have 5 families living under the same roof, and so landlords will make more money out of 5 Haitian families, even if it's 5 single men. They will, each of them will pay $600, and so you make more than out of a poor local Springfield family. So
Yeah.
talk about that, talk about waiting longer at the hospital because they need translation. Their English is not good.
Yeah.
And then they talk a lot about car wrecks, which I was
So this is the thing that was fascinating during the debate, because it does not appear that anybody, and I guess we can get to the big moment here. Have you found anybody that was eating a dog or eating a cat?
So not only that, I don't think I've seen as many stray cats in a city as I saw in Springfield, Ohio. Maybe in Istanbul. That would be the only people I was like, well, they seem to do pretty well here. So no, and as you know, the woman who initiated the cat thing actually found the cat in her basement.
Yeah.
She's alive and well. As for the dogs, the rumor, I think, started with ducks. So there's this young man, an African-American, Anthony Harris, I interviewed him, who has a podcast, and he posted something about this because a woman told him that she saw Haitians in the local park eating the ducks from the pond, and then, I don't know, people think that probably Trump thought it was dogs and not ducks.
Well, I mean, this whole thing metastasized on the internet in such a weird way. I know, and this is source, growing up in public school around Haitian kids, other black kids would make fun of the Haitian kids by saying that they ate cats. That was a thing. That was a thing. I never got the sense that it was a real thing. It was just a thing that I remember from growing up. So I assume that this is some element. I've heard different things that, look, different cultures have different respect for animals. That is not a controversial thing to say, but for whatever reason, that has stuck to Haitian immigrants in America. So it was interesting to see it pop up in such a gigantic way in a presidential election.
And every Haitian I interviewed was like, ça fait pas partie de votre cuisine, it's not, we don't have that in our Haitian cuisine. I was like, I know, don't,
Yeah.
We're like, we eat a lot of things. We eat pork, we eat chicken. I swear we don't eat cats and dogs. I was like, I know. And I interviewed the owner, the manager of the main Haitian restaurant, who was telling me, can you imagine the phone calls that I get of people asking me, do you have cats and dogs on the menu? And he also received, it's fun, and I sort of was laughing at the memes and songs before I went them, but they're really not laughing because they have death threats. I so many Haitians who are telling me, well, I don't drive my daughter to school anymore. We're all afraid we're gonna get killed. There were, like, when I was there had been 35 violence threats, including bomb threats. They were all hoaxes, but still.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Well, it became the center of a super contentious election. And underneath it, and this is what I found to be really interesting, and it tells you everything that you need to know about the whirling dervish that is Donald Trump, for which, attention is the main thing. What else happens around it and exactly how he got to the attention, he'll figure out later, is that there are, at least from what I've seen of other reporting, and I'm curious your opinion on it, there are some issues. There are some cultural issues that are happening in Springfield because it is an exploding town. And as you mentioned before, there have been some really contentious car wrecks. For example, there was one car wreck that hit a school bus and a little girl died. And that's a little boy. I apologize. And so underneath, yes, so there's this thing that's said, and on top of that, on the internet does what it does, and teens are dancing, and people are making music videos, and it's its own kind of abstracted weirdness where people are laughing for their own reasons. Underneath it, there is real tension that goes on immigration lines, that goes on racial lines, that goes on cultural lines. So
when you speak, depending on who you speak to, obviously, but the NGOs I was talking to about the driving thing were telling me, well, yeah, we've been funding and sponsoring driving classes in Creole. They were also saying that for years Ohio has been ranked, if you look at the rankings, they exist, the 5th worst driving state in the whole US. And they're like, you know what? We don't need the Haitians for this. Like, we have so many people who drive without a license. So yeah, sure, the Haitians might not be the best drivers because they're not used to it, but we are terrible drivers.
Yeah.
Without them. One of the things that also, because I tried to talk to the factories, the big companies that employ Haitians to know what employers think of them. And they all hung up on me. So I ended up talking to a staffing agency who's been staffing lots of Haitians since May. They actually moved in because they saw that there was demand. And they were saying that companies love them because they show up on time, they're reliable, and they pass all the drug tests. And the region has a massive opioid problem. So I don't know if that also reflects on the driving, but yeah, overall, not great drivers in the region. Anyways, Haitians.
Yeah. So top level,
yeah,
you got the sense, and again, no reporter who parachutes in for 48 to 72 hours knows everything about a town. You're only trying to get a snapshot of it and then bring it out to the rest of the world. But this is obviously a lot more of a complex situation than any one little meme can say. And there has, like any small town that gets caught up in a whirlwind this stiff, they're feeling it. They're feeling it there.
There was a town hall with Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes.
Where people could express whatever they felt about the situation and what came
This
out.
is his new thing, by the way. He wants to go talk to everybody. I think it's his new rebranding is I'm not an edgelord, or at least I'm an edgelord you can yell at.
And also saying I'm from Cincinnati, I'm from here, unlike you guys.
Yeah.
Which,
He is an Ohio resident. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess he also has his views on the Senate. Well, so, but so people were talking a lot about car wrecks, about the hospitals, and they were talking about being fired because companies want to employ Haitians for lower wages. Now, that probably happens. The Haitians are interviewed. So there was one working for Amazon who was a water engineer, by the way, in Haiti. But he was packing boxes all day long in Amazon for $20 an hour. So that's not bad. Another one was working for, it was a farming tool plant, I think, 16.5 an hour. But, I'm sure this also happens. Social dumping, lower wages.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, under the table, again, going back to my biggest relationship with Haitians is growing up in South Florida. Every dishwasher I ever worked at any restaurant I ever worked at, they were all Haitian. Not all of them got a straight paycheck. I will say that without a doubt. Like that they were there to work.
And listen, it's a small Rust Belt town. People who've never traveled their whole entire life. It's a big cultural difference. That's for sure. You can't deny that.
How did the Vivek event go?
So the venue turned out to be too small for the number of people who wanted to attend, which, I mean, all the Trump team and Trump himself, they always do that, right? If you wanna make it inside, you have to show up like 3 hours in advance.
Yeah.
So, but people really wanted to talk. One thing that was interesting is that it was co-hosted with Moms for Liberty. Who got a chance, like one of the moms just used the opportunity to say that education was a failure and they were for, vouchers.
Reform. Yeah. They have, if you're not familiar with Moms for Liberty, they are a anti-teachers union organization. And they really, really got going during the pandemic when parents were watching their kids do school on Zoom, and it gave to a gigantic bloom for stuff like that. But a controversial organization, Moms for Liberty.
Let's say that. But I don't know, some 15 people maybe asked questions, talked about their lives. Sometimes they had nothing to do with the issue, but you could feel that those were people who had difficult lives. Somebody was talking about being a vet and being certainly poor. Someone was talking about his health problems and not being able to receive the care he wanted at the hospital. It's difficult to say this is directly linked to the Haitians, but you can tell this is a poor town.
Yeah.
I interviewed people who were working in supermarkets too, and some of them have signs saying no food stamps are not accepted here, and they're telling me it's the majority here, and we just don't want to have to deal with that. That tells you something about a town.
So maybe more effective as a stealth campaign stop for Vivek than it was a airing of grievances for the people of Springfield.
Exactly. And on the other hand, just the night before, there was it's also a college town, right? So it's bluer than other places around. It's purple. And the night before, there was a protest in favor of Haitians with
Yeah.
people coming from all over with signs saying, "We love you, immigrants welcome," etc. So, not all Springfield is hostile to the Haitians. A woman told me, this is the best that could happen to us. The city is dying. We need labor, and we need them to attract and to keep companies working.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating story that got distilled into maybe the dumbest thing that is possible, but such is the world of our political system these days. Let's swing on over to another assignment that you were just on, and this is something that doesn't have a whole lot of LOL abstractions to it, and that is your visit to Dearborn, Michigan, one of the most pivotal states in this election. The first time that we saw Kamala Harris get heckled was Gaza protesters outside of Dearborn. In fact, we were texting with each other, and then I was like, "Hey, wait, did you see this?" And you didn't realize that you had already talked to the women that had heckled Kamala. But you went to Dearborn. What is the sense there? Because I know the Democrats are hoping that the switcheroo between Biden and Kamala has maybe given the party a new coat of paint with them.
It's over, honestly. So first of all, I went to Hamtramck. And
Okay.
I initially went to Hamtramck because the mayor endorsed Donald
Trump.
And
that is a majority Muslim town, Hamtramck, right?
So that's a majority Muslim town. That's the town that banned the gay flags.
Gotcha. Yes.
And the people there are Yemeni, so a lot more conservative. Like the women you will see there don't wear hijab, they wear niqab. So I don't know if you know the difference, but you will only see the eyes.
Yeah, that is the full coverage.
Yeah, exactly. From this region, it's not the burqa, which is from Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's a very different thing, but it's the niqab, and people are just conservative. And so I interviewed the mayor and asked him, why he endorsed Trump. And of course, there is Gaza. That's for sure. Yep. They want to punish this administration. But he told me very openly that it was also about the whole LGBTQ thing. The pronouns.
Oh, really? This is a go woke, go broke thing.
Sure. And I don't know if Americans realize this, but to me, it's absolutely zero surprise. When we've had the gay marriage law in France, people who protested were Catholic families, but a lot of Muslim families too. I mean, there is nothing surprising there. So those ones, and when you speak to people on the street in Hamtramck, they will tell you that they're Trump fans.
Yeah.
Their level of English is usually a bit lower than people in Dearborn. People in Dearborn are mostly Lebanese, more Lebanese. You have Palestinians too. Women wear the hijab. It's way more liberal in a sense. And they hate Trump. Although I went to an RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard event last
year. Yeah, because they're now out there. RFK's out there saying, "Don't vote for me. I don't care if my name is on the ballot."
And there were lots of Lebanese. So those ones will vote for Trump. But most of the people in Dearborn from the community will vote for either Jill Stein or Uncommitted, or as a guy told me, I went to the mosque to hear the preach of an imam and the guy was telling me I will write down the name of Michael Jackson or anyone, but just not Harris. It's not even about they don't care who wins. They care who loses, and they want Harris to lose.
They want Harris. They want this. So I would assume that it is the administration that Harris has not been able to rehabilitate in their mind. They probably would have said the same thing about Biden had he stayed on the ticket, right?
But I think they considered Biden an older guy. He openly said he was a Zionist. They're not very surprised, and they liked his, as one imam told me, his avuncular style. The nice old man.
Scranton Joe, Union Joe. They so even the imams are into that Union Hall beer politician.
Exactly, the tragic family story history. So they kind of liked him, and then they put some hope in Kamala Harris, which is why they waited for a little bit of time before, like, the abandoned Biden campaigns only became abandoned Harris on August 19th. They sort of wanted to give her time, but then there was the convention, as you know, where she said that she would always make sure that Israel could defend itself. Then there was this couple who spoke at the convention about their son that was hostage in Gaza.
Yep.
And there was no Palestinian American allowed to also talk. And then there was,
So that was something that, you always, and you never know, especially when you're involved in covering the kind of TikTok of politics, the minute by minute, not the app, but like the moment by moment stuff. You always wonder, okay, what is the line between the stuff that we care about because it's in the political press and people are obsessing about it, and a real voter, right? A real voter that's going to matter. The voters in Dearborn, Michigan are going to matter to the Democrats because they need to turn out that they need to turn that area out because they're going to need every vote they possibly can in this election. When the uncommitted delegates in that convention are outside and they're protesting because they were told they were going to have a speaker, then they were told that they were not going to have a speaker, you wonder, okay, is this just something that gets talked about on liberal and progressive message boards, but really who actually cares about who gets to speak during this convention that most Americans don't watch at all? But you're saying it mattered in Dearborn, where those votes are going to be important to the Dems.
so it was seen as a humiliation. Totally.
Wow.
And then Detroit happened. If you want Donald Trump to win, just say so. Just say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking. When she said that to a group of girls who were saying, Kamala, you can't hide. We won't vote for genocide.
Yeah.
So, all this. And also you have to consider that those two are two very different movements. The uncommitted are Democrats.
Yeah.
But on September 19th, they just said that they can't endorse Harris.
Yeah.
The abandoned Biden, abandoned Harris, they consider themselves not Democrat anymore. They
Gotcha.
really say they want her to lose. And what they told me is that their calculation is that they need to convince 50,000 people. And a woman I was interviewing who ran for local office twice as a Democrat and who's now going to run to endorse Trump.
Wow.
That's a local office. But she was telling me, you know what? Even my family is 10,000 people. So 50,000 people, I can tell you, we do have them. But they're not only saying that. They're saying, okay, 50,000 in Michigan, but 10,000 in Wisconsin, 10,000 in Pennsylvania, and we will get them. I have no way of knowing if this will matter because
who knows?
The weather might matter that day, or anything
Yes.
will matter when it's so cold. But she's not getting those votes. She's not. So maybe they did the math that they can, with women and abortion, with blue collars, they can make it up for it. I don't know, but they are not getting those votes.
Well, it certainly was. I don't know. I mean, this is where we're going to get into after the election, all the postmortem of how much of this was on purpose, how much of this just kind of happened. It doesn't appear that Kamala initially just wanted to totally brush the Gaza people aside. It felt like she wanted to give them more of a platform, at least some kind of salve to say, look, I'm not going to call myself a Zionist. And then, she's got Leon Panetta up on stage and Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney are endorsing. And she's like, hey, we need to give everything to Israel that we possibly can. And it's like, well, okay, look, either you're going to try to triangulate it or you're going to run to one of the ends. But at a certain point, I guess you have to choose, and they have. And
exactly. So this community was Republican at the beginning of Bush because he very intelligently made the point that conservative values were Christian and Muslim. Exactly what I was saying. And then 9/11 happened, and they became Democrat after all the backlash and the Patriot.
After Afghanistan and Iraq
Afghanistan, Iraq, Patriot Act and everything.
Yeah.
And then even more so with Trump. but now you have Gaza, and they were telling me exactly that. And now, she's endorsed by Dick Cheney. Like, this is the worst. This is the worst case scenario for them. So
so that actually is something that registered for them, that it's like, oh no, like this George W. Bush is back if we vote for Harris. Harris has to lose.
Yeah. That's the thing they say, and now you add Lebanon to Gaza. So in Dearborn, I went to a protest in favor of Lebanon. And this time, again, I could use my French because a lot of Lebanese were just really, really happy to speak French. I interviewed a guy who just lost 8 relatives. 8.
In the bombing in Lebanon over the last 2 weeks.
So when pundits, political scientists tell me, they'll come home. What are they going to do? Vote for Trump? Well, I'm like, yeah, you know what? We're certainly not voting for you. Like, there's even a woman who told me, when she says, if you want Trump to win, just say that, otherwise I'm speaking. She was like, well, you know what? Yes, I do. I want Trump to win.
So that's the thing that you do here, is that, like, well, how much better is Trump on this? Do you think Trump would stand in the way? And these voters are saying, we'll find out. You want to know what? We'll find out what Trump will do, because we don't want to see any more of this administration.
So I was really surprised to see that, because of course the obvious question is, what about the Muslim ban? And they're they're like, well, but it was amended by the Supreme Court. They're super precise on the Muslim ban. They know every change that's been made to it. They say it's not like we've been massively deported by Trump, under Trump. It did not happen. They say Obama was the deporter in chief.
Yeah.
And they say, you know what? They say that Trump will finish the job and level Gaza. Well, it can't be really worse than what's happening right now. And if the Democrats lose, they will know that they should listen.
This was the reason why that they needed to be more active here and have their voice heard, because that has not happened thus far.
Yes, and Trump spent 20 minutes when they had the rally in Flint, Michigan, with Amir Halib, who's the mayor of Hamtramck. And then the other day again, the rally I went to in Warren, there was another, which was more a town hall, by the way. And he spent 20 minutes again with that mayor. I mean, and Kamala Harris is not talking. They say her campaign is not talking to those people. She, so Engage, a Muslim organization, endorsed Harris, but organizations like CARE, say that it's not true that they represent the majority of the Muslim population. And so from your, and again, nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. There's only so much that you can know by being on the ground for a couple of days. But from your viewpoint, like, the anger's real, and the solution is Kamala Harris has done nothing to redeem the Biden administration. She is a part of the Biden administration. And if anything, it's scarier, because now we're worried about the Cheneys coming back to power. Yes. And they're saying, you know what, with Trump, we know what we're getting.
Yeah.
They say that Kamala Harris is, that her speech at the DNC was only fluff, that it's just nicer words, but nothing really happens. And the anger is totally real. I mean, I was trying to put myself in that man's shoes when he was saying, can you imagine, it's my tax dollars. My tax dollars are helping fund the bombs that are killing my family. I was trying to think, if I'm paying my taxes here in the U.S., if for some unknown reason the U.S. was bombing France today and people from my family died, and I probably wouldn't be voting for
the person that dropped the bomb. Which is the other insane thing about this, is that it's, you've seen, and this is not unique in the Middle East, but I would say that even more so than normal with this administration, no one's really happy. Everyone's mad. The Israeli fans are saying that the Biden administration is hedged too much and they're pushing for useless ceasefires and they need to make sure that they back and there should be a clear goal for the only representative Democratic, ally in the Middle East. And then the Muslim side it's not like they feel cold comfort for how much the Biden administration had said that they want a ceasefire and a ceasefire is close or, whatever light fist shaking has been done to Netanyahu. They're furious. They believe that this is totally ridiculous. And so I can only, come to the solution that, if you're going to take a loss, you should probably also net a win. And it doesn't appear that the Biden administration, nor has the Harris campaign that has succeeded it, particularly done either.
Yeah, that's really what I think. I think they probably did the math and thought that they can lose those votes. It's very.
I don't know that they have. I mean, well, again, there's a lot of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden, what was looked at as a moribund blowout, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of excitement about that. I'm not the polling man. I don't know. All I know is that Donald Trump outran his polls in the Rust Belt by crazy margins in both elections. In Wisconsin, it was like 8 points. In Michigan, it was like 5 points. And Pennsylvania, it was like 4 points, right? So if you're running neck and neck in the polling, I would not be comforted if I were Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the uncommuted vote was 100,000 people in Michigan.
Especially if you are talking about a very engaged minority that I think the polling models are still assuming that when they talk to people of that demographic, that they're going to be Democratic voters or they are modeling for that. And that just might not exist. When you're putting together your universe of voters in Michigan, you might be counting on and weighting a poll for a person that hates this candidate now.
Yeah, and I also among the people in Dearborn, there is no doubt those people are Bernie Biden voters.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they like Bernie Sanders. They all love Bernie Sanders. And in Hamtramck, there was a lot of first-time voters too, who just recently got citizenship and who are like, yeah.
And they're like MAGA. They're like
And they're just like, yeah, I'm a Trump fan, and they were talking a lot about the economy. I mean, it's a small town, 28,000 people. You hear the call to prayer on the street. It's just like,
yeah,
I was not expecting that. So it's difficult to know how this is going to play out, but she's not getting those votes.
Well, Michigan was always a state that seemed like it was going to be a tricky thing. I don't know why, especially if the convention thing, and we talked about it on this show with Jen Briney, that like just give Monday at 5:30 in the afternoon when no one's there. Just do it. They were willing to take that. Now you could later say, oh, it was disrespect, and it would have been, but at least you could have put them up on stage and then you had the whole entire rest of it to make up for it. But who knows what kind of pressure behind the scenes that there was, but that
they all talk about AIPAC, but yeah, not only that, but it took me like 20 minutes to find the place where they were having their press conferences. It was in another building at the DNC. The whole thing was, and their position was untenable. But so as to the polling, I was telling that woman who was telling me she was going to endorse Trump after running twice as a Democrat for a local office. And she was telling me, I can tell you, no one in the community in their right mind is going to vote for Harris. I was like, well, I don't know, but this is nowhere in the polls. Like you don't.
Yeah.
It's one of the few states where the Harris campaign doesn't. It says it leans deep.
Yeah.
And she was telling me, yeah, well, you want to know how many text messages I receive per day to for polls that I don't even answer, that go directly to my spams because she had done this thing on her phone that she doesn't even receive them. She's like, we all do that. And also a lot of people just don't read English well. They speak only Arabic. So yeah. They don't show up in the polls. I don't know how much this is true. In Hamtramck, I wouldn't be surprised because the interviews I've had with people are just, I went to the barber shop, I went to the grocery store, I had dinner every day, lunch and dinner at the Yemen Cafe, and people spoke very, very little English.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, that's one of the arguments in the idea that this is not a particularly close election and that Donald Trump's probably up in a lot of the swing states that are currently polling neck and neck, is that reply response bias. And I'm just going to explain this. Nobody's sending an email. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm saying many people are saying that it's reply response bias. And the reason why you saw the polls bounce so electrically for Kamala Harris, and you have seen like her approval rating go from the basement below Biden to now in some approval polls above water, is simply because, especially when more polling now has to be text message, because you can't just rely on phones, on corded phones. Not cell phones are, you're going to screen things out as well. That you are always just going to be beholden to people who want to answer polls, and Democrats have wanted to answer polls for the last 2 months, 3 months, however long this has gone on. And so if what you're saying is true and nobody in Dearborn wants to answer a poll, they might have wanted to answer a poll before, now they sure as hell don't, then maybe these swings can be understood like that. But I don't know. I mean, we're all going to keep learning these lessons. It's the reason why I always tell people that polls they're flickers in the flames, man. Like you can take them generally seriously in terms of movement on aggregate, but when we get obsessed with them, it's really hard. And part of it's because, we don't know if nobody in Dearborn if Dearborn is just turned off from this election and they're like anyone but Harris,
and
and Hamtramck is like, no, we're actually like, rock ruby red, like this is just a Trump, we're gonna be wearing MAGA niqabs in 2 weeks, like, then what else are you gonna do?
I know and again, there is nothing particularly surprising in the idea that some Muslim would be conservative. I interviewed 2 couples at the Trump rally. One was from Sterling Heights and they were from Bangladesh. The other one was from Hamtramck and Dearborn. They were, the woman was from Bosnia and the guy was from Iraq. And they were like, well, everybody's been very nice to us on the line here at this Trump rally. We just like the guy. I mean, they didn't see any contradiction. You also have to think that the ones who are recent immigrants, they don't really care about all the baggage that Trump has. No. Well, and that's where, when you start talking about undecided voters, those are some of the people that you're talking about. You're talking about people that like, they don't know what the hell's going on. They generally know. I think who described it on the show the other day, that it is the same thing as somebody who only watches the Super Bowl. Like, you generally remember, like, oh, is Tom Brady, who does Tom Brady play on again? Okay, yeah, he's usually there. And then it's another team. It's the Kansas City team. Okay, you generally know, and then you kind of care a few days before you go to the party, and that's who we're talking about. And in states like Michigan, it might decide the entire enchilada. Yeah, I think there were maybe 5 to 10 questions at that town hall, and everything was about jobs in the auto industry, and Trump saying that he was going to make sure the job would stay in Michigan. And you're a young couple that just moved to Michigan, and you want to hear that. Yeah. They didn't talk about the war. They didn't. And then in Dearborn, with RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, they very aptly avoided the Gaza thing, but they talked about Ukraine and said that Trump was the candidate of peace.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed Lebanese at the end, I was like, so they did not talk about Israel. They were like, what are you talking about? Of course they did. They talked about peace. That's all we want to hear.
Yeah. If you can get away with it, look, that's what you want to do. Get out of Dodge.
They also didn't take any question, whereas I was in, I'm trying to think, the week before Springfield, I was in Morgantown, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
At the, close to Lancaster County. So Amish people and
Yep.
a lot of blue collars and that was Doug Burgum and Christino, and they took a lot of questions from the audience. This time in Dearborn, they didn't take any question.
No, get out. If everyone's smiling,
Yeah.
see you later, folks. See you on down the road. Journalist question here. Have you done one of these JD Vance rallies where he takes Q&A from the rally stage?
Not yet. Yeah, I'm gonna try to look for that. Yeah.
That's a wild one. I mean, I think it's smart. It's smart from his point of view because the thing that he has done since Kamala got in there was try to highlight how available he is and Trump is compared to them. And I do think that that's a fair point to make, but it's also very like a Trump rally has been a Trump rally has been a Trump rally. It's the Big Mac of politics. It's kind of been the same thing. It's gotten a little smaller, a little tighter these days, but it is the same thing. Vance, this is kind of like the MAGA chicken McNuggets. Like it's a little smaller, but it's chaotic. It's kind of super weird, but it's very much in that MAGA thing.
Is that where he gets the crowd to boo the reporters?
Yes. So
it's like
so in a lot of ways, it's an evolution.
good old classic.
Yeah. It's an evolution of the Trump staple because the Trump at every MAGA rally, Trump will be like, look at the press. They turned off the lights. They're not going to show it. And everybody boos, but it's theater. I don't know. I've never felt.
Which also happened. You remember I told you this also happened at the last rally of Biden in Detroit.
Oh yeah. He told everybody to turn around and boo the press right before he quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's new. Okay, I was used to this at the Trump rallies, not Biden. I mean, that takes a certain level.
Isn't it weird though that like there was a point. It was probably the debate where it happened, where it was like Biden started doing it and Kamala's done it too, where it's like now Kamala's like, hey, I'll shoot you if you come into my house. We're gonna take fentanyl seriously on the border. We're gonna lock down the border. It's like, man, Trump won. I don't know if he'll win the election, but he won the battle of the Overton window because everything right now is what he was talking about when he came down the golden escalator back in 2015. Like that is, Yeah,
for me, the turning point was really the hearings of the committee to impeach Mayorkas.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden you were hearing talking points from the Democratic members of the committee that I had only heard from Jim Jordan until now.
Yeah.
About fentanyl, human trafficking, smuggling. And it's just like, wow, okay, this is
well, I'll tell you what, looking at public opinion polls and seeing that like 70% of Americans, including 30% of Democrats, are for deportations, not just closing the border. Closing the border used to be controversial. Now that's popular. Deportations are popular now. And it's like, that's something that you wouldn't have even touched if Mitt Romney said, Mitt Romney had to say self-deport because he was afraid of saying the word deportation. Now it's a thing.
I totally agree. For the midterms in November 2022, or I think it must have been in October, I spent most of my time between Nevada and Arizona, and I went to Yuma. And I think one night in Yuma by the wall, so the wall at some point is on native land, and the tribes there refused to build a wall. So the wall just basically stops.
Ends, yeah.
So you just have to go around. And I saw a few hundred people come over that night, like 500 people, and Border Patrol was like, yeah, that's a slow night. And
Yeah.
it's like, you know, if you don't come here, you don't really know it. And at the time, it was still racist to say that there was a migration crisis.
Yeah. And that's not less racist every day.
And that reminded me of Europe in 2016, where crise migratoire was an expression that was deemed very racist. It was in crise de l'accueil, so a crisis of the welcoming facilities, but certainly not a migration crisis. You couldn't say
Yeah.
that. So, yeah.
Well, Claire, thank you so much for coming on the show. Always great to talk to somebody who's actually out there doing the work and not a fraud like me sitting comfortably in my studio. But I'm sure I will.
We still have to do that tour on the drinks in important states.
Yes. No, we do. No. Yeah. No. It'll be. Look, we're gonna have to kill time as soon as this election's over. So we'll figure it out.
Oh, you think it's going to be over at some point? That's great.
Well, I mean, based on what you're telling me, it might be over on election night if all of Dearborn refuses to vote for Kamala. This thing could be over.
It's interesting. We'll see.
We'll see. All right, Claire, thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
My Instagram and Twitter are exactly like my name, Claire, and then my last name, Meynial, Meynial. And that's the name I use on Twitter and Instagram.
There we go. All right, go ahead and follow her. She does great work. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Justin.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. Thank you to both Michael Cohen and Claire Meynial for coming on the show. Great expertise from both of them. If you want to send me an email, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. If you want clips of the show, follow us on social. It is Justin R. Young on TikTok, Justin R. Young on Instagram, Justin R. Young on X, and then Politics is where you find our YouTube. If you want a link to the audio version of the podcast, it is px3podcast.com. Of course, you can support us with a one-time donation, paypal.me/paidjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas, 78715. The only place you get our bonus content is TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus podcasts per week covering all the news we miss on our free podcasting schedule. And our $10 tier gets your name read at the end of the show like these fine folks in the Titanic $10 tier, including our friends Edwin, Invoke Gloria Young, for King of the New World Order, Mike, Edison, A Dog Named Checkers, Sarah Jeannie, Matthew, Phil, Dr. G, His Nerdiness Charles, Neil, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Berkeley Steven, Chad, Zombie Doc, Matt P, Chill, Sean, Song notes by David Potts, Nicholas, Sparky from Stevens, Florida, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Michael J. Brown, Devon, the CFP, the Borge B, Will, Gloria, my mom, Gray Zone, Peepaw, Robert, J. Van Ord, Marcus with a Q, DP4 Bongo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Adam, Dr. Whiskey, Dustin, D. Laser, Nick, Joe, Middle Age, Mike, the Jen, Alo, D. Really, Craig, and Andrew. You want your name read on the show. One place to go. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. We're into October now. A lot of surprises. We've already had a couple on the political side, and we might have one here on the home front. Stay tuned. But know that I love you. Please know that I love you. That'll wrap it up for us here in Austin. From everybody me, Ashley, the little baby Bella, we I'd like to thank you guys. A reminder that some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss all three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.